Hello, YouTube, and welcome back to another book review from me, your host, Logan Albright. Today I'm talking about a very strange book that I just kind of saw in a bookstore and decided to take a chance on, not knowing anything about it whatsoever. It was shrink wrapped, so I couldn't even look at like the inside cover to see what it was like. It's this book here. Look at how weird this is. Beautiful hardcover with these greens and reds and purples and this like avocado eye. Very weird. The book is called The Book of Disquiet by Fernando Pessoa, and I'm sure I'm mispronouncing that last name because I don't speak Portuguese. But Fernando Pessoa is one of the major figures in Portuguese literature, it turns out. I had never heard of him. I had never heard of this book, but I thought it looked interesting, and I decided to take a chance on it. And I'm glad I did because it is very interesting, and it's very unusual. I think this is considered one of the great works of Portuguese literature, and it's certainly the first work of Portuguese literature that I've ever read. The Book of Disquiet was written between 1913 and 1935. It was left uncompleted and unedited at the time of the author's death. And what it essentially is the series of fragments that are not very much connected, that take the form of aphorisms, ruminations, meditations, thoughts, feelings, just about life in general, about a lot of things, actually. He talks about death quite a lot. He talks about dreams quite a lot. He talks about mysticism and occultism. He talks about the city of Lisbon. He talks about writing and art and poetry. But it's almost like diary entries or journal entries. But he described it as a factless autobiography, which I think is a good description of it because there are no facts in it. And it's basically just thoughts and feelings and impressions. And it's not written from his own point of view, at least ostensibly not. The first half of the book, which was written in the 19-teens, was written by another name, and he calls these names heteronyms. They're kind of pseudonyms, but I guess he imagines them as having different personalities. And then there's like a 15-year gap between the second part of the book. And the second part of the book is written by another different heteronym of like a fictional bookkeeper in Lisbon. I wasn't able to detect too much of a difference in the voice of these two characters. They both seem very similar to me, and I expect that their views are very similar to the author's views. I don't think that they are really fictionalized in that way, but that was sort of how he presented the work, was that's the work of these fictional heteronyms, as he called them. They're just like numbered fragments. I guess they've been published in a number of different forms. People have tried to edit them in different ways. This is obviously translated into English, this edition. These are just organized chronologically from when they were written. There's no like through line or story or plot or characters or anything, so it sort of doesn't matter what order you read them in. But these ones are organized from the earliest to the latest, as near as they can tell. And you just read them one at a time and go through them, and it's about 450 pages worth. It's an extremely melancholy book. It's not normally the kind of thing that I would like, because it's quite bleak and a little bit depressing, because the Pessoa seemed to be a very depressed sort of melancholy character. It's very autumnal, and he talks a lot about despair, and disquiet is a good word, and misery, and the pointlessness of life, and how he has no real friends, and has no love, and just has no motivation to do anything, and everything is futile, and how we're always dying. Every living breath we take is a step towards death, and that kind of stuff. It's quite goth. It's sort of moody, emotional, melancholy, bleak poetry. It's not written in poetic form, but it kind of has a poetic flavor to it, and that would normally kind of annoy me as someone who's like just miserable human being who needs to get on with life and find a way to enjoy himself. But there was sort of a nice beauty to it. There's sort of a poeticness to it. There was sort of just a flavor of something bittersweet that I found enjoyable reading it. And it's not the kind of thing you have to read all in one sitting. You can pick it up and read one little chapter. The verses, I think of them as verses. They're not really verses, but the fragments range in length from like one sentence to a couple of pages. So some of them are 2 or 3 pages long, and some of them are just 1 or 2 sentences or a paragraph long. And you can read them sort of like little verses or Bible verses or aphorisms or poems or however you want to read them. And it's sort of comforting and sort of nice. There's a part in here where he talks about having a book of like Portuguese grammar on his bedside table. And he says he just reads it over and over again. And he's never read it all the way through, and he's never finished it, but he picks it up and reads passages from it the way that someone would read from the Bible. And he finds it comforting in its familiarity, and he doesn't like to read new stuff. He just likes to read that same grammar book over and over again. And I can imagine engaging with this book in a similar way. Just, you want a little nightly reading, you pick it up and read a chapter or two of this book and just kind of soak in its in its little languid melancholy. Very unusual. It makes me interested in some of the other things that he's written. It makes me interested in some of the other works of Portuguese poetry. He alludes to a lot of other Portuguese authors who I've never heard of in here, and there's some footnotes that help you explain who those people are. So I'd be interested in checking them out. But overall, just a very strange and different book, and one I'm really glad I picked up because I recently saw it listed on a list of like top 100 books ever written, and I was pleased to see it there because I was like, oh, I have that, and I haven't read it yet, so I should read that and see. And I did read it, and it was I don't know if I'd call it one of the 100 greatest books ever written, but I certainly got a lot out of it and enjoyed it. And it's nice to have a book where it's not about the plot. Like I feel like modern books are so heavily plotted. Like you have to hit story points A, B, C, D, E, and get from one point A to point B, and do all these things. And you have to follow it really intensely. And a lot of people think the more complex your plot, the better your book is. This is completely absent of plot or characters. It's just little thoughts. It's a little bit like the Meditations of Marcus Aurelius or the Confessions of St. Augustine, things like that. It's like almost philosophy. I wouldn't quite call it philosophy because I don't think he has sort of an overriding worldview that he's trying to get across, but just sort of his own ruminations on life. So I just thought it was a beautiful object as well. I love the colors. I love the hardcover of it. I love the painting on the cover, and I just wanted to own it. And so I'm glad I picked it up. If you have not read it, I would recommend checking it out. The Book of Disquiet by Fernando Pessoa, originally written in Portuguese, translated into English, and I think this is a relatively new edition, and it's advertised as like the first complete edition that has everything in it. So that's good if you're into that sort of thing, I suppose. It's got some endorsements from famous authors who have said that they have also been inspired by it and loved it. So yeah, that's really all I have to say about the Book of Disquiet. It's sort of a hard book to talk about because nothing happens in it, but it's worth picking up and checking out if you're into that sort of thing. And again, it's not the sort of thing that I thought I would like. If you had told me what this was before reading it, I probably wouldn't have read it. But there's something about the prose that is compelling and that is emotional, and that it's nice if you just want to hunker down on a cold day and just kind of wallow in the bleak futility of life or the bittersweet nature of life. If you're in that sort of a mood, this will suit your taste. I think it's nice to have books that go with different moods. Sometimes you're really upbeat and happy and you want to read some joyous text and some humor and something. That's great. And then sometimes you're just feeling a little down and you want to read something that plays into that emotion. And so this is a nice selection if you're into that sort of thing. So that's all I have to say about the Book of Disquiet by Fernando Pessoa. I was glad I picked it up. I thought it was a lot of fun. Well, fun's a weird word for it, but I thought it was interesting and different than most stuff I'd read. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on it in the comments if you've read it or if you're interested in reading it or if you read anything else by him. And if you enjoyed this review, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, click the bell for notifications, and check back every single Wednesday for yet another book review. I got another one coming up next week that I think you'll be really excited about. So I've been your host, Logan Albright. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you next time.